that was kind of the first focus that we had on the computer vision side with the robotics team is, can we map out in 3D?
On this episode of the RCN podcast, the CEO of SuperDroid Robots, Steven Uecke.
The robot's there for a series of months, so once it gets set up, it can just keep doing the same thing over and over. We go to these customers who have superintendents that are begging them and have been asking for this exact solution for years.
Behind the scenes, those are some of the biggest challenges of growing a company.
Sometimes I ask myself that same question as to, where is that gap? Because they say, yes, it does exactly what we want it to do, and the price is fine. And then it's like,
how realistic is it to build a mass quantity of humanoids in the future that are walking around a job site and performing those tasks?
In 10 years, some of that will be definitely feasible.
And welcome to the Reality Capture Network podcast. Appreciate you joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Good to talk again.
Yes, I'm very excited to dig into your journey a little bit from really back. I'd like to start back with like when you were coming out of school. What did you want to do when you grew up?
Actually, the reason I went to school was I wanted to be a custom home builder, and my dad suggested that I get a degree that might assist in that route. And so I said, okay, well, what's the one thing you need, from a licensing perspective? And it was either an architect license or a structural engineer license. For large custom homes, I guess, or at least in this area, you need that. So said, well, architecture is a little too artistic for me. I'm more of a numbers guy or math guy, so chose the structural engineering route, went through that, and then discovered all the regulations surrounding that I needed to then work for 5 years after the degree in order to then take the exam, or at least the first of a few exams, and that to eventually get the structural engineering license. So when I came out of school, I was looking for a place to get that 5 years of experience.
Okay, awesome. And what were some of your first roles or projects and things that you were working on?
So I started a small structural firm outside Chicago here, and it was mostly, so there's two main areas. One was connection design, which I still do a lot of now, or our company does. And so that's working for steel fabricators or steel detailers, designing the connections between beams and columns and braces and all that. So that was one portion. And then the other portion was restaurant type of structural engineering or LA Fitness, that kind of project. So chain type of buildings.
Okay, very cool. So I know you at some point started into business on your own. What did that path look like?
So I started dating somebody that was from around the area here, and she was in pharmacy, a doctor of pharmacy program up at University of Wisconsin, Madison. And when I met her, she was a little bit before that. She was still an undergrad. And so decided that we would get married. I would move up there, and we would be living in Madison for the 3 years that it would take for her to finish her doctorate degree. And so I talked to the company here, and they said, you can work remote or whatever. And this was long before that was a common thing. So wasn't quite sure how, the type of work they did, it was all in-person type of thing. So it didn't seem like it would be a very smooth process. So instead said, well, maybe it's not an opportunity to try something on my own, which is, kind of the end goal there. I was right at 4.5 to 5 years of experience there. So I was kind of done with that portion and could take the exams and everything. So decided to do that. And so I worked from home, then in our apartment in Madison for 3 years. Before that was cool to do that. I guess it was pretty weird.
Yeah, less common back then. So what was the transition or spark that went from you working for another firm to deciding to start your own business? What led into that?
So it always kind of wanted to do that. So growing up, my brothers, mostly my next oldest brother and I, had a landscaping company for a number of years, remodeled houses, things like that. So it's kind of familiar with dealing with customers and building up some sales pipeline, performing work, having that responsibility. And when I had started working at this other firm, it was a little bit different for me, where they had their own ideas of what we should be doing. And so when I said, hey, can we go chase after this client to try to get their work? Looks like they have nice projects. They said, no, not really. Let's stick with these other clients. And so that not having that control to go in the directions that I thought we should go in was, maybe made not working for somebody more attractive to me at that point.
Yeah.
And then with the location move and the fact that the connection design work is all virtual, there's no site visits or anything, it made sense to try to do that at that point.
Okay. Awesome. Now, something that we've talked about in the past, having you involved at our conference, is your focus on robotics. So, how did that start? You're doing all this structural work and this engineering work. When and how did you get into robotics?
Yeah, so we, over the course of, so all that started in 2011, and then over the course of the next several years, expanded the service offerings beyond structural to MEP, and then to general contracting on the commercial side. And so saw, actually even before I started my company, I was looking at ways of automating the work that I was doing on the computer through software, which can be done. Once you get into the general contracting side, you see a lot of the things on site that are inefficient or should be able to be automated, repetitive tasks, things like that. And so then started looking for ways, all right, with consulting, there's nothing, it's kind of hard to explain, but there's nothing that you can pick up and hold that's your work product. It's a PDF that you send. It's buildings are built in the end, but that's not really my direct work. I'm not developing that specifically. So I was thinking of ways that I could have a product of some sort that I could pick up and hold and say, look, we designed this, we built this, and you're going to pay for it because you're going to then carry this yourself. Because that's the other thing, over the years, one of the most frustrating parts of business is getting paid. So you'd think, I pay people to do this work, but then for some reason, my customers don't feel like they have to pay me.
Oh yeah.
And the employees don't understand either how, the other side of that, like, why can't we do these different things? Why can't we have this, fancy office and, all these different things? And it's because I'm paying you, but not getting paid. So then I figured, well, if you're selling an actual product, maybe it's easier to get paid for that versus, I've got the PDF. I don't really care if I hear from you again.
Yep.
So that was in around 2018. And so we said, okay, well, there's this convergence of all these different technologies, the motor technology, the battery technology, the computer vision technologies, and some machine learning things at that point. And they're all kind of converging together. So let's see if we can, and there's a need for automating physical tasks in construction. So let's see if we can put that all together into robotics. And so that's how that portion started.
Okay, awesome. And as you started that robotic side, what were the first things that arose as far as like a problem you were going to try to solve, or what those robotics might be used for? Where did you start with that, and how did your kind of envision of the robotics expand over the next couple of years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first attempt in 2018 were we basically said, all right, well, first of all, can we build a robot? So we built a rover, a drone, and then we're working on a dog at that time. And so we were just kind of testing out, do we have the right team that we can build these different things? But then from the solution side, I was just going based off of my experience doing field visits for restaurants. So you go in, you have to go in the middle of the night, usually because you didn't want employees to know that you were there surveying their site, which would be then, basically they would be fired at some point. The location shut down and switched to a different restaurant. And so you'd go in, it'd be dark. You have to pop open ceiling tiles and take pictures of things, try to map out where everything is. And, this is the sort of stuff that you're involved in probably a daily basis. But, from a structural side, it was mostly just photos and sketching things out, writing things down. But it was pretty disgusting job, especially in the restaurants with the kitchens and trash all, it's just, not very pleasant for me. But also you get back to the office and you say, I missed all this stuff, of course. I thought I had it all, but then, what's around this corner? Or is this really what I wrote down? The dimensions don't seem to line up. And so then that was kind of the first focus that we had on the computer vision side with the robotics team is, can we map out in 3D above a drop ceiling, in a dark area? So our first product was actually called Meerkat, where you'd pop open a ceiling tile, stick up this device and turn it around, and it would light up the space, take photos, and then create a 3D point cloud from all that.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we didn't have at that time was the full end-to-end connection of customers. So that was just me coming up with ideas, and we didn't have anyone that said, well, pay for it and I'll buy this many of them, because product development is an expensive endeavor.
Yeah.
And somebody wants just one, that's not enough to justify tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of development.
You said first step is, can we even build a robot? You dig into that, you spend the time and the investment, and you trial something you think. You've had probably time since then of continuing development and thinking of other problems, or maybe getting some feedback. What are areas that you envision robotics coming into play in the next 10 years, let's say? People are thinking about the future, robotics coming into workforce in different ways. What are some realistic places you see it really becoming normal over time? Yeah,
becoming normal would be, the easiest things would be data collection and material handling. So those are things that are being done now in other industries and in construction now as well. So we have some products along those lines as well. But those are the easiest things. Once you start getting into performing actual physical tasks that are done by people right now, like drilling holes or screwing in screws or cutting things, these are a lot more challenging. But in 10 years, which is that timeline, some of that will be definitely feasible within that time. And really, the technology is there to do all that. It's just a matter of will the customer base and the technology and all the financing of all that come together at the right time.
Yeah, we've all seen some of the viral videos of like the humanoid robots, doing backflips and walking around, and you're like, how realistic is it to build a mass quantity of humanoids over time in the future that are really walking around a job site and performing those tasks? It's interesting to consider, like, will that happen? And if so, when?
The navigation around the job site, that's something that's largely been solved. We have products that do that. The identifying of different objects that you want to manipulate, that's, pretty easy. Most people are familiar with those different things. Now, can it be done real time? That's a little bit harder, but it doesn't necessarily need to be real time. So, the robot can sit there, analyze, and then once it has something identified, then it can track that pretty easily. It's really the manipulation side. So, for example, soldering a pipe is an example that I like to use because that's one of my most hated jobs that I do at home. When I have to do plumbing work and I have to cut the copper pipe, that in and of itself is a very dexterous operation that you have to spin this thing around, and then eventually it breaks free. You got to clean the end of that with another tool. You've got to, sand it down a little bit with a, wire brush, and then you've got to apply flux. All these things are pretty hard to do as a human accurately and to get it all to fit together. So I think the most feasible scenario is more on the installation side, where something's already been fabricated. The interesting thing about construction really is that fabrication and installation are usually lumped together, except in structural steel. So structural steel fabrication is completely separate from erection, which is, installation. In almost every other trade on site, fabrication's done on the fly on site. And so a lot of times the same people are fabricating and assembling. Mm-hmm. But robotics, being able to fabricate something accurately when it's not locked down, on the fly adjustments like that would be pretty challenging, even in 10 years, I would say. But if there's some combination of those two where you could say, I can fabricate this at a factory, that's something that's being done already with assemblies, but it can even be at a component basis. And then that can be installed by some sort of robotic, whether it's 2 arms and 2 legs or wheels and arms or whatever it is. I think that's feasible.
I definitely believe autonomous collection for reality capture tools is a necessity for the future. What are some of the challenges you think we still face in making that continue, actually start getting adopted and implemented on more sites?
I mean, there's 2 different things as far as we're concerned. There's the low resolution data collection and then high resolution data collection. So it's photos or centimeter, multi-centimeter level point clouds or meshes versus millimeter level. And so when we're talking about an as-built, the millimeter level is more important. We're talking about construction progress or documentation of the construction. Millimeter seems to be less important to people. They might do a few of those types of data collections throughout the course of the entire project, maybe once right before drywall goes in. And but usually centimeter level or photos is enough for them. So, and really that's the place where autonomy is a lot easier because the robot's there for a series of months. So once it gets set up, it can just keep doing the same thing over and over. If you're doing an as-built, then it's a one-time deal. Yeah. You're not going to usually go back there a number of times unless somebody had told us they wanted robots on site at their facility so they could do regular scans, and it was, they could hop into it real time and see what's going on if there's an issue. So that's pretty progressive, and those people usually don't end up paying for anything. It's more of a concept for them.
Sure.
So I think the challenge right now on the biggest area there is the in process on the construction site, the progress monitoring, and the issue that so our robots can navigate the construction site. We've had it at 2 large, one top 10 general contractors, and they've run it for several weeks at their site. And really sometimes I ask myself that same question as to what is the reason for, where is that gap? Because they say, yes, it does exactly what you want it to do. And the price is fine. And then it's like, okay, so then that next step is obviously you guys are going to buy this, right? And they say, oh yeah, just show us, make these few modifications and show it again. And I think that maybe it's the conservative nature of the industry that might be the biggest bottleneck, that people aren't willing to waste 10 cents to try something out. It's just like, you have this huge amount of value that can be added. And unless they see it work 100% for free for weeks, they're not willing to spend a dime. And it's like, I don't get it. You know, you're paying people to stand around, and you're paying them $150,000 a year to do this same thing. How is it not worth? And even the people that are running these pilots, you're paying them more than you would pay for the robot to run the pilot. And it's like, you know, to me, it doesn't make sense as to why there is such a big hesitation. If somebody asks for a drill or something else, yes, it's less expensive, but you go and buy it because that's the tool for the job.
Yeah.
So when you have, the amazing part is we go to these customers who have superintendents that are begging them and have been asking for this exact solution for years. And we go show the superintendents, they say, yes, this is exactly what we're looking for. And then it's crickets after that. And it's like, okay, maybe it's a disconnect between technology and operations, or, you know, we haven't quite figured out where that gap is located.
For people who have not seen your systems or seen, you know, and done that test or trial of running it on a site and it working well, like, what does that process look like? And, or are there still any, challenges that are not solved yet? Or, you know, what are some of the concerns that maybe could be, in place about using one on a normal basis?
Yeah. So the way that it works right now is you go to, you know, you bring the unit in a case to the site, you set up, or you open the, it's kind of like a Pelican case. You take out the robot, you take out the base station, put the base station where it will remain for the majority of the project. So that's kind of like a static, it's like a 1 foot by 2 foot piece with a, you know, a vertical QR looking code. And then you supply power to that and set the robot on it. And that's where it lives when it's not doing its tasks or performing its duties. Then the operator drives it around the site. So most of the people that we've talked to are doing this not when they're doing it once there's, you know, framing starting to go up in the building. So it's a little bit further into the project where they're actually even taking photos at all. And so that's where that starts. So they drive it around so it knows this is the areas that it's supposed to go, and then the areas that it's not supposed to go. Then the user would set up, this is where I want the photos captured, or the route that I want it to take, essentially, you know, with these waypoints. And then, you know, that's basically it. So then they say when they want it to run, and then it runs on that schedule and uploads the photos to our platform. So there's a few things that people have mentioned as areas of improvement. And one of them is the drone deploy integration, which we have. We have a drone deploy integration so that when those photos are captured, they're uploaded to drone deploy at that location on the project. And so that, you know, that satisfies that requirement. The other is that the units that we've been demoing don't have the base station. So they have DeWalt batteries instead. So we said, okay, well, we have this system that's got the base station and the docking and all that stuff. And they say, okay, well, you know, we need to see that. So yeah, that's understandable. The biggest thing is just that in some of the instances, it's interesting when people ask for a demo, you know, I would think of a smaller project maybe to try it on, but most of the customers are asking for these big projects. So they're, you know, hundreds of thousands of square feet. And the unit that we've been demoing is our standard unit. So it's not designed for buildings that large. It's designed for more of the typical smaller buildings. So it can get lost in long hallways with like alcoves and things like that, or large open areas like a large atrium. So it is able to lose where it is in that map, and then the user has to provide input, which is not good. You know, it's not intended for that sort of scenario, and we don't have a demo unit out that resolves that. But there is, you know, the next level up has a LiDAR unit on it, and those same users have said, yes, if this had a LiDAR, I can see, it's kind of like they can see that it would be resolved with a LiDAR. They just need to see it.
Yeah.
So, so it's all logical things there, but those are, and maybe it's the skeptic in me. I don't know. Whenever somebody has something that is an objection, I always get the feeling that once I satisfy those, there will be additional ones.
Yeah.
And they will be much harder to satisfy because they won't be as logical as
Totally.
So I like to try to get like, all right, if we provide all this, then that's it, right? Then you're buying 10 units or whatever it is. And the answer is yes, of course. But, in some ways it's hard to, and, we're developing that and we'll ship it over to them once it's ready to demo and all that. But it is if we're asking for what is the biggest gap, it's that, when we said in order to accelerate the amount of demos, because we have, a bunch of companies that have asked for these pilots and demos, in order to accelerate that, it'd be nice if people paid for it.
Yeah.
It's a few $1,000s and then it's crickets there. So it's like, that I think that's the biggest gap, because we as an industry are expecting technology companies to just float, finance this huge project for years with no return and based off of somebody's word, who may not be there next week. They might have moved on to another customer. They might not even have the authority to give you the input that they're giving you.
Yeah.
And it's a huge leap of faith for technology companies.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that, you're talking about two things, being more of a startup, right? You're building your own company, trying to solve complex problems, and it's within a space that is not already proven and accepted. And so, trying new things, developing new products that people are, wanting but hesitant of and don't have all the right, that I can imagine is a very challenging space. You mentioned it earlier, just even around cash flow. I mean, that goes to even some conversation around, building a business or entrepreneurship or trying to take steps outside of just working in a role at a company. That in my experience is probably the most challenging part of business. It's not even finding the client, and it's not being able to perform a good service. Behind the scenes, those are some of the biggest challenges of growing a company.
Yeah. And especially when you have lead times that are multiple months for some components that, there have been people that say, well, if it was higher accuracy, then we'd buy this. And well, we could do that, but it's $130,000 sensor that we have to get in order to do that. And then you say, well, am I Steven willing to go based off of this person's word that if I buy this and show it to them, that they'll buy not just that one, but 5 more. And, it's hard to say that.
Yeah.
So, cause that's I can't just go sell this on Amazon or something, it's a very particular market. It's not a mass market, and they're very expensive. So it becomes difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. How does the growth and focus around AI that's being, there's lots of focus on AI right now, which, I would say ChatGPT is probably the most basic version of what people talk about. How much does AI play a role in the products that you guys are building and or into the future? Yeah,
the AI as people understand it doesn't have much value, but as it actually works, has a lot of value. So it's required for things we're doing with the humanoid and with the dog to be able to make the units cost effective while still being able to balance, to be able to walk around and not really the navigation side. We don't use any AI in that right now. There's ways to do it that might reduce the processing to do it with AI, but but it's just classic right now, and that's worked really well for us. But with the if you have 12 or in the case of our humanoid Rocky, 20, 24 actuators on there, all moving, they're all getting movements at 1,000 cycles a second, and they all have to be coordinated, and they all have to be all dynamic based on where the position, all that stuff gets pretty hard to do with classical methods unless they're very expensive actuators. So we've used that to basically say, all right, well, we're going to have AI or machine learning type of things consolidate all that data and then be able to make decisions based off of that versus and account for all the inaccuracies in these actuators versus building very expensive actuators. So I think that's important. Once we get to the place where we're actually manipulating objects and really I would say, installation, things like that, the AI, the vision-based AI will become more important to make those adjustments on the fly. So that's where it'll be most. Now, the language processing is really, will be a really important part, but that, at some point people won't consider that AI really because it's just so basic, it's just functionality that's it's pretty much expected probably now. And people didn't know that it took AI in order to do it because it seems easy, but yeah, I think there'll be more and more of that as we go forward.
What are some of the things that surprised you that you ran into or that maybe you weren't expecting? What have been some of those biggest challenges?
When I first started in robotics, probably the biggest surprise was that not everyone thought they were cool, that robots were cool, that, if I said, hey, I have this idea of how I can improve your business with a robot, people would say, I don't want to talk to you, I'm going back to work here. So that was probably the most surprising part of the process. And then that was several years ago. And then the most surprising part more recently is just that if somebody comes to me and asks me for a robot and then I provide that to them, that they, for the price that they ask, that they don't jump all over it.
Yeah.
That if somebody says, if you can make it for this price, I'll buy 1,000 units. And then you show them the product at that price. They say, well, you show me more, that's been the most surprising part, but I think that's just a matter of time. I think, that's not a long time. It's a short time that people will see. Because right now, if we're one of two companies in the US, at least, that can do this sort of thing, then how do we know that it's real? Like, is this just some tricks that you're doing? Or, if the major players can't do this, how can you guys do it? And so eventually, once they see it on job sites and see other people buy it, then they'll believe that because there it is. And so I think it's really just a matter of time on that one. Yeah,
no, I agree. I think I would assume that some of the hesitation is also just like maybe people's thoughts around robots. Like there's the kind of just cultural or that fear we see that with all technology. People are afraid of, if this actually works, I'm going to lose my job. It's, I think there's some of that has to be worked through. And I would assume that you probably run into that quite a bit with the robotics piece, even more than maybe we do with LiDAR or other technologies. But it's for robotics too. I think for all technologies, we hear so much issue, especially in built environment industry, about lack of resources and lack of young people entering the industry, and no one's applying for jobs. And it's like, well, these are the ways to fix that. Like if robotics and scanners and drones and models and analysis and these software platforms, like these technologies can help all of the industry do more with less, which helps us start to actually solve some of the problem that we have. And then two, I think it also attracts the next generation to want a job in the industries that are having the challenges because they are very interesting. And, young people today, they'd rather have robots and iPads and headsets than a hammer, and have to be on job site all day, doing the laborious work. So I think that just becomes, hey, it is over time. And I think thankfully we're getting to a point in some industries that we're seeing some of that transition as some older people are retiring out and people are coming in with fresh perspective. I do agree that I think it's a matter of time before some of that, changes.
Yeah. Yeah. And some of it might be a changeover of management in the different companies, because in construction, once you know something works and it can be done in a certain way, then the tendency is to keep doing it that way forever. If you're project manager or some project executive overseeing a large complex project, you don't want to worry about, is this robot going to mess up versus I already know what my risks are associated with a person. And so even if you say, yes, I can't find enough people, for that scenario, there is no other alternative because that's the only solution that there is. If you have a robot fulfill a job or fulfill a portion of a job to spread people out, that's not a valid alternative because that's an entirely different business model as far as somebody way up the food chain is concerned. So I think that people that are more taking responsibility for some of those, the labor shortages and things like that, and willing to entertain other solutions to those problems, I think that has to be somebody that's earlier in their career and doesn't have all the everything baked in already. And then also I think that the subcontractors will probably drive a lot of that because they're more boots on the ground even than the general contractors. So they're the ones that have to go hire the people. And so if you can say, well, my 4-person crew can be a 3-person crew because I have this, these things assisting them, that would be more palatable for them. It's also an area with subcontractors, a lot easier for newer players to enter. So, you have these one-man shops that are going in there and then they hire people and they gradually build up. So you can have people that aren't as set in what was done 10 or 20 years ago, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Do you think with how much you focus on this, do you think that some of the fears of, I guess I would even say just general public about AI or robotics, do you think any of the common misconceptions or fears are legitimate? And or do you yourself see potential of problems with the two of those in the future?
Mm-hmm. So I think that the fear of AI taking over the world is not well founded. So these systems are they're artificial intelligence, but they're not intelligent. They are data consolidation. So that's they don't think for themselves. Even the ChatGPT, they're consolidating, I don't know, terabytes, petabytes, I don't know how big their data set is, and predicting the next word, and then taking that, predicting the next word. So they don't have this master plan of killing humanity or keeping themselves alive. But the bigger thing is, as you replace, or I wouldn't even say replace, but as you replace some of the roles that are done by humans right now with technology, those are a lot more hackable than humans are. So I think the real risk is on that side with bad actors, humans that are trying to gain access to these systems for no particular reason, just because that's what people enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And so I think, but that's something that can be accommodated for, as we have with most other areas. We have credit card fraud that is rampant throughout the world, and yet we still use credit cards because there's systems in place that minimize the impact on the consumer and the companies and all that. So you can figure these systems out. It's just, it can take time and money to do that.
Yeah. Being a business owner for a while now and kind of growing through your journey, what are some important traits for a leader that you think most people need to focus on as they're trying to grow?
I would say that the thing that I lack the most and that would be the most helpful to have is the day-to-day management. So we can set up this process of here's what people need to do, the team around you needs to do in order to accomplish this, but then following up on a daily basis without micromanaging to ensure that that gets accomplished. That's really how, there's not many people that are self-motivated enough to say, yes, I understand that, and I'm going to hold myself accountable on a daily basis to make sure I perform all these tasks that eventually roll up into this grand vision. There are some, and those are the exceptions, but the business owner needs to make sure they're the only ones that care as much as they do. If there's a problem, it comes out of their pocket, and it's not small dollars. This is like the cash going in and out is, people's houses that are moving in and out. And if there's mistakes or people aren't on task, that's the damage that there can be. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I wish I was better at is keeping, I get bored of things pretty quickly, hence the need to automate everything. But yeah, if you could have that trait, that would be pretty important. The other thing is, and it's really very similar to that, is on the sales side. So if you can focus on selling or, operations for me and my side is a lot easier than the sales, because even if you have the things falling between the cracks, you at least, in theory, have money coming in if you can accomplish it. If you don't have sales, then you don't have anything. So, but I think it's probably the same trait in some ways where you have, sales is a numbers game. You have to follow up. You have to send, however many emails a day, however many phone calls. And if you are having somebody else do that, you have to follow up with them on a regular basis to make sure that's getting done, and not just numbers recorded, but actually, value added to the people that you're talking to. So I think those are the two most important things, but both are my weaknesses, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, that goes, it's very different being a solo entrepreneur than it is building a entire company. And very often I would say the person that starts the business that maybe has the ideas ends up not being the one who's actually good at, certain parts of the business. I've found myself in the same. It's like you have this focus, you have this mindset, this thing you want to do that you're good at, and then you learn all this business stuff as you go of like, oh wait, this is actually one of my weaknesses, but it's super important. Yeah. And so that idea of fulfill those with people that maybe that's their strength and it's what they're good at, and as opposed to having to be the one that is good at everything. That's a great lesson.
Yeah, and I think there's also a little nuance there too that I'd heard years ago that McDonald's franchise owners, there's usually the one that the owner is at is the high performing. All the rest are less than half of the performance of that one. And similar reason to why Chick-fil-A usually only allows a franchise holder to have one restaurant, because the person that writes the checks for the payroll, like I said, they care the most, and they can keep, if they're on site and they can see everything going on, they can kind of keep track of it without having to have a formal process. But as soon as you remove both, the two-way visual cues from that equation, and it's a different location, even if it's a different office or whatever it is, where you get to a certain size where now you have managers managing people, as the more layers you get, it's just, it's disconnected. And then everyone needs a more clear vision and then a whole process to keep them accountable to that. So,
So you mentioned back earlier, we talked about why you started in business in the first place. I'm curious because as hard as business is, and there's so many challenges, and what is it for you personally that really drives you, to get past the failures or the struggles or the what drives you to stay in that role?
Yeah, I think for me, it's what I enjoy doing. So I like and it's kind of hard because I can not really hard. It's kind of interesting that I can find myself enjoying different positions for a time period, but the things that I've enjoyed the most are over time building of these new products and solving problems for customers and having the control to kind of do the whole end-to-end system. So I don't know what that looks like if we ever get into this, massive organization where you've got hundreds or thousands of people. I don't know what my role would be at that point that would be enjoyable. But for now, it's being able to control that whole process. And I think if I were to go somewhere else, I wouldn't have, what would really work best for me if I went somewhere else is if somebody said, run this whole thing, do whatever you want, and I'll just give you the money to do it. To me, that would be kind of like if they also gave me all the profits, that would be the dream scenario. Yeah. Because then it's no risk and all reward. But, those don't exist, I don't think. So having all the risk with all the reward, I think is what's enjoyable for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. I think we'll wrap up with one more question, and it's still in this vein. So I love asking people, okay, you've been on this journey for quite a while now. So if you were to go back and tell your younger self when you're just starting out, or I like it because it's some of the feedback that may go to younger people that are listening now. What's some of your advice you would give to that younger self?
I would say focus on sales, get a sales job. I never did the knife selling thing, door-to-door stuff, but I think I did have my own landscaping company, but we had customers flooding us because we were the local, kids cutting grass. And so I was spoiled with that, with sales coming through the door. So yeah, I'd probably say get a sales job of some sort and learn how to sell and the discipline that it takes to do that day in and day out, not just for a summer, but maybe for a few years, because it's a process and it's a grind. But it's, in my opinion, it's the most important part of business is to generate sales. So
yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, I think sales. The other nice thing about building that skill set is every company, every industry can always use good salespeople. Yeah. And then if you are a person that falls into starting some type of your own business, then that will be very beneficial because money will help you. You can't really survive very long without it.
Yeah, you can always find, you can always find people to execute if you have the sales. You can always accomplish it in some way.
Yep.
So.
Well, thank you very much for your time today. I'm excited personally about the future of robotics, and as we look at more in our community of all these mapping technologies and all these different pieces of hardware, handheld, mobile, with the thought about the fact that we don't have enough workforce to accomplish where I think the needs will be in the future. I see robotics being a big piece of that. So I'm excited personally to get some hands-on and see them implemented more. So keep up the great work, and we're excited to see more from you.
Yeah. No, thanks. It's been fun, Matthew. I think that your type of role here that you're fulfilling at RCN is maybe the most important piece of getting that accomplished, because without people advocating for that sort of an approach, it would take several times longer and at some point there's going to be some gap that emerges and it's going to have an impact on people. And so, hopefully we can get it resolved before then. But yeah, I appreciate the conversation and you allowing me to come on here on the 5th of July. So
appreciate it. Yeah, no, and thanks for the kind words. I mean, it is what excites me so much about what we're doing with RCN is trying to be that middleman, realizing that there's so many amazing technologies. I believe so much in what they can empower now and into the future, but then finding that, so many companies struggle with sharing their stories, sharing their technologies. There's not a lot of resources out there that help somebody go through that path of ecosystems of technology. So, the goal for us of really trying to bridge that gap between like end owners and users and the technology creators to fuel each other and build relationships. It's exciting to see that work, and hopefully it makes an impact in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you again, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too.